place, that's just the way we've always done it. I mean, like,
Yep.
just nobody's bothered to ask, right? Nobody's bothered to say, well, why? So I love that story.
And that's the thing that if I could, that I would beg and ask all of you as you're in those roles. Here's what I would say to you. It's not about where you are in the hierarchy. Always behave like it's your organization.
Hmm.
I always joke about if it was the Bank of Lynn, I would always say that if this was the Bank of Lynn, is this how I want to spend these extraordinarily bright resources? And so when the answer for that is no, then I try to figure out, well, what can I have them doing instead? And that is not something that only somebody in a specific place in the hierarchy can ask. If
Hmm.
you're doing something in a role, you gotta find a way and a time to pick your head up to understand I'm doing
Right.
this. Why am I doing this? Is it really having the intended impact on the business? And at least ask the question.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Very important. Love that, Lynn. So guys, feel free to keep on filling up the chat with questions. I'm already seeing a couple there. So Lynn, I want to start going on these questions. Um, but
Perfect.
be, but before we do that, help us out here. How can people find you? How can we support you? How can people stay in touch with you?
So y'all are gonna laugh. The easiest way to find me professionally is on LinkedIn. Just look up Lynn Labrador. Yes, Labrador is is not a suit. That is my actual last name. It
It's
is
not a
a
stage name.
no, it is not. It's a less common Latino last name. It's in Spanish Labrador, but in English Labrador, like the dog. And yes, for those that are curious, one of my dogs is a lab. But you can find me on LinkedIn, Lynn Lynne Labrador.
Okay, great guys. So if you want to stay in touch with Lynn or you want to support her, Lynn Labrador is you can find her on LinkedIn. That's the primary contact way. All right, Lynn. So let's start looking at some of these questions, and feel free to, if you're listening to us, feel free to add your question either on Instagram or on YouTube. But Rohan is asking, how does HR analytics help with overall HR policy? How does it add value to process compared to a pre-analytics era?
I think that. Thank you, Rohan. That's a great question. I again because of my Six Sigma background, I often wonder. You can't. I guess the easiest way to answer it is people don't. There's an old saying in business: people don't do what you expect; they do what you inspect. And I feel as though analytics is the inspection. So many organizations will tout, oh, we're trying to hire veterans. Oh, we are committed to the LGBTQ community. Oh, we're committed to this, that, and the other. But without the analytics, it's lovely press release. What analytics does, what HR analytics does, is it actually informs where you're getting it right, where you're getting it wrong. Now, analytics is only
Mhm.
part of the question because the other thing I get on my high horse about is you should be asking anytime somebody's asking you to do a dashboard because dashboards end up being kind of the fallback of give me this dashboard that shows me this, whether it's in Tableau or some other program. The question you should be asking is if you've been asked to do that work is this dashboard going to drive a decision? Because if it's not, then something's missing. And I think about that a lot when I would look at some of the diversity metrics, because every organization has different pay bands, and how you measure your diversity at certain leadership levels is you look at those bands. At City, C14, 15, 16 is where you start to get into the more senior leadership bands.
Sure.
And so then you start looking, well, on a self-disclosure, how many of them meet the diversity metrics? Well, you can report that number, but when you see the number so skewed, and you always do, sadly, what the analytics won't on a canned dashboard report is to tell you how and why. So what I always tell people is a dashboard may be the starting point, but as a leader, you still got to dig under that, because what you're not going to have visibility to, at least not yet, is what programs are in play that would move those things. So your question around how does the numbers drive process? Well, I'll give you a real life story. So if at one time when I was at Bank of America, I was the co-chair for our diversity council. And at the same time, like every other organization, we looked at our numbers and we said, Jesus Christ, at the front line, in some markets, we were over diverse. I mean, we had 65% diversity, but you saw a marked flip when you got to what was called the B4 level, which was department head. So, B4, B3, B2, B1, those are your exec levels. And there was a literal flip where now all of a sudden it was 20% minority, 80% non. And we said, okay, that's great. What's going on? So then we went back and got some more data to look at the performance reviews, the performance evaluations of those people. Didn't seem to be any stark difference there. So then we dug deeper, and then this gets to Rohan's question. How did we change process? We instituted a formal high potential program for minorities that mandated any high performer in a marginalized group had to be assigned XYZ mentor for the next 2 years. So the reporting and the analytics of that reporting drove policy and drove the process, because the numbers are great, but you don't do anything with them. We've all been victim at some company, and for those of you that haven't started, you will be, of the annual VOE survey. I watched this happen in a city. You do this annual Voice of Employee survey. One of the lowest scoring questions was, do you think anything's going to change as a result of the survey? And the answer got worse and worse year in and year out, because you get all this data, you don't do anything with it. And then what we watched happen was participation in the survey started to drop. So it starts with, no, we don't think anything's going to change. Then they just stop doing the damn thing. So analytics is very powerful, but there have to be people who take the numbers and start to get at root cause of what may be dry and testing some different things. So Rohan, I hope that answers that question a little bit, but it's a very powerful place to point people in the right direction of the things they can do.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. So our next question is from Patrick. I just graduated with my PhD in physics, where I did a lot of data science work. I don't have any job experience. I've had good interviews, but other candidates are chosen. Any advice to stand out?
What I will say to listen, I feel your pain. So at the risk of TMI, I myself have been looking for my next gig for the last 2 months. So I'm living what you're going through. And I think it's, I'm not going to give you doom and gloom. What I'm going to tell you is you only need one job. And on any given day, there's thousands out there. You just got to make that connection. Here's a couple bits of advice that I'm using that's helping open doors. I think it's important, even in school, while you say you have no job experience, I'm betting in the course of getting a PhD, God bless you, you're way smarter than I am. I only have a bachelor's. You probably participated in different projects or things where you had to solve things. And I think on your resume, you need to call those out, because I think one of the concerns for a lot of recruiters is, and I will say this as somebody who's hired hundreds and hundreds of people, I think, what the schools don't always do such a great job of is helping graduates understand how to translate the work they did academically into how you will apply that in a real workspace. And so that would be my advice. Think through some of the challenges, some of the projects you did through the course of your learning, because those will have applicability to how you could add value in an organization. And Patrick, again, I'm on LinkedIn.